I'm sorry, but you missed part of it. Your fault. Okay. You can't eat tobacco. Again, yes, you can, but it's not. Well, it's probably delicious. I don't. It's not good for you. All right, we'll go with that. Okay.
It's not broccoli.
Well, no, but broccoli's good for you. Okay, right. It's not. Okay. Also, the hostility of the natives. We looked at 3 wars yesterday. While the Europeans are immune to smallpox, that doesn't mean they're immune to everything. And when you're eating tobacco or cotton, you're weakening your body so it can't fight diseases as well as otherwise. And so they're almost wiped out. You're looking at a map of North America, and the red area represents the 13 colonies, and then the green represents the French colonies. This is the map that I wanted you to pay attention to. So this purple area represents the area of European colonization of the Chesapeake Bay. And because things aren't going well, a guy by the name of Nathaniel Bacon. Yeah. Nathaniel Bacon, what a delicious last name. Leads an uprising known as Bacon's Rebellion. And I do believe this is correct. This is the first attempt to overthrow a colonial setup, a colonial government system, some sort of established mechanism is in place, and Bacon overthrows it. We got no food. We got no jobs. Our pets' heads are falling off. That's what was happening. They had no food, they had no jobs, and their pets' heads were falling off. Plus, where are the women? There were no women. Right? You want to raise a family? It's kind of depressing. Sort of lonely. So what did he do? He attacked everybody. He and a group that followed him attacked the natives, but also attacked the colonial legislative, the government, the legislative government that existed. I believe they burned the governor's house to the ground. And it failed. They got Bacon, who, by the way, died of a disease. So that's kind of ironic. And that was the end of the rebellion. But the noteworthy thing here is it was the first attempt. By the way, when I say it's the first attempt, what do you now know?
There were more.
There were more. There were more. First time that there was an attempt to overthrow a colonial government. So things aren't hunky-dory, right? Again, I know this is ridiculous, but imagine NASA creates a settlement on the moon, and they put into place mechanisms, who's in charge, and then they actually allow for generation after generation. And then one day they try and overthrow the person in charge. England would be like, what are you doing? England would be NASA. NASA would be like, what are you doing? Where are the women at? What's up?
How long after America was settled before the first?
I don't know.
Okay.
Right? So Columbus sailed in 1492. Plymouth Rock is 1620. Bacon's Rebellion is in the year. So simple math.
What year was Bacon's Rebellion?
It was the year 1000.
1675.
That's it. 1675. Just like I said.
Wait, no, now it says
Very,
1676.
that's correct.
1676.
So imagine 100 years before the colonies declare independence, Bacon is attempting to. Yeah. Okay. You've seen this map before, but I really like it. It does a good job of identifying the Middle Passage and where most of the Africans were. 0.5 million brought to North America, compared to like 4.5 million to the West Indies, 5 million to what today we call Brazil. So we weren't a significant part of these. The English 13 colonies were not a significant part, but they were a part. And the people that crossed are Africans. Their descendants are African Americans. right? You don't go to Africa and say, look at all the African Americans. They're not African Americans. They're African. Although there is one that kind of ironic twist. This country right there, that country right, if my hand were steady, imagine this is my shooting hand. Hold still. That country right there, there.
The
There.
green one or the
The red
brown?
one.
The red one.
Is Liberia. Liberia was a country formed in the early 1800s by recently released African American slaves who traveled to the land of their ancestors. Today, though, the descendants of those people, the ones that came from America and moved to Africa. So just think about it now. If your ancestors were from Africa and you live in America, you're an African American. Guess what the people who today live in Liberia, whose ancestors were from America, guess how they refer to them? You got it. They are American Africans. Because their ancestors were from here, but now they live there. Isn't that crazy? I understand what you're saying. Okay. Anyway.
Do you have to like trace that back? So, like,
Yeah, they're African American Africans, but if you want to do that, we're all from this region of the world. All of us. Every one of us. Unless you're going with the Bible. Okay. Well, all right, fine. Okay. So do know that as the English colonies are increasing their planting of cash crops, they need more slaves. You gotta have more slaves. So the slave trade increases. And this is a very depressing picture. Obviously, they didn't have cameras back then. So this is an artist's version. And there you lay for hours upon hours upon hours. You were chained. Right? Obviously, if you weren't chained, you would try and get out because this is incredibly depressing. That guy right next to you got sick. That's too bad for you. If he died, they're not moving that body. They're leaving it. Gross. Kind of like those socks that Miss Donnelly found. And what's with the leggings?
So why didn't you pick up the garbage?
Yeah.
She left the garbage.
In the bank
Only picked
advisory,
up.
we went out into the place where she was for the video. The garbage was still there.
Did you pick it up?
Well, Miss
Good
Donnelly's
job.
days are numbered, I guess. I gave you an inaccurate thing. I said if half lived, that was a good day, and may have been guilty of slight exaggeration there. Sorry, it was a 20% death rate. So 20 out of every 100 died, which is a horrific number.
1 out of 5 died.
That's yeah, exactly 1 out of 5. And this is a bit of repeat, and that is they did legislate how the rules about slave ownership. They were called slave codes. And here's where a new idea was born. Not only is the person that I purchased a slave, but all offspring. I'm buying your lineage. When I buy you, I'm buying your offspring forever. Perpetual slavery. Okay? Which is kind of elite. This is unique in ancient times in ancient Rome and ancient Greece. You may have been a slave, but your kids weren't slaves. You were a slave, and then that was it. It was over. There was no slave class, but now we do. We have a slave class, and education was deemed illegal. Not only were you discouraged to, you were breaking the law if you taught your slave to read or write. Questions here? We'll fly. All right. Next slide. Okay. Kind of an interesting chart, not necessarily anything that you need to write down. This is, they took the states that made up the future Confederacy, although this isn't quite accurate because Missouri was part of the Union, so was Kentucky, West Virginia. So this isn't quite accurate. But basically, you're looking at the states that would later on make up the Confederacy. What you're looking at is a series of pie charts that represent the percentage of the population that was African versus the percentage of the population that was not African. And some numbers are kind of interesting here. So slave is the light purple, and whites are the blue, and then a little bit of free African Americans. Look at this one. This is the state of South Carolina. A larger slave population than not slave population. That's sort of interesting. Is there any other one like that? Mississippi. Very good. Look at that. The two states that had a larger African population than white population were South Carolina and Mississippi. And then there were others that, you know, had a significant one. I mean, Louisiana's pretty darn close here. And the reason I'm asking you to do this is because we're going to make a contextual, we're going to make a kind of a conclusion. Guess which states, pick two states that you would guess had the most aggressive slave codes.
Those two states that had more.
Yeah, South Carolina and Mississippi. Incredibly aggressive. Guess which two states were the first two states to secede from the Union? Those two states. Guess which two states during the era of segregation had more confrontations than any other? Alabama was a biggie too. Those two states. None of this should be surprising to you that it was South Carolina that seceded first, that it was Mississippi that had extremely aggressive slave codes. It fits the pattern from way back when, right up through to including today. Issues that have to do with race in the former Confederacy. Do note that South Carolina had the highest percentage. I guarantee that that's a test question. Part of your test is your ability to look at a prompt and then make some conclusions. And I can almost promise you that this very map will be something that you have to look at and make some conclusions about. Okay? It's your ability to interpret what's going on here. And my friends, that's it. We've done no, that didn't take too long, right? About 15 minutes or so. Okay, you can put that away. So let's get back to the writing of your paragraph. Okay, so I want you to get that out. You were supposed to have a good faith attempt made. Okay. And again, this is not something I'm going to walk up and down the aisles and then grade you. That's just, if you chose not to do it, you're a big boy. I'm not, okay, or big girl. I'm not. Okay. It's not going to hurt your grade.
Where did it go?
Now it might cost you later, but that was your decision. Okay. So I want you to, if you wrote it, I want you to look at it with a fresh pair of eyes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to actually trade with someone and help each other, and then we're going to start tackling the next paragraph. But look at it yourself. Look at your hook. Does your hook bring the reader in? Is it a story? Is it a question? Remember, this essay is not about whether or not Columbus was a man that advanced the cause of humanity or hurt. It's about the historical interpretation of such. You're not comparing Columbus. You're comparing Zinn and Schweikert and Allen's interpretation of Columbus. It's a historiography essay, not a history essay. Although history certainly has a lot to do. Okay? So look at your hook. The hook is the one I want you to be the least stressed about. For essay number 1, it's really, really unlikely that I'm going to look at your hook and say, no, this fail. Okay, I'm going to be pretty forgiving as far as the hook is concerned. But again, you could have the question as the hook. I mean, you ever think about where does someone have a history? Do you even bring your history books here anymore? Hey, someone who brings a history book. Very good. Is this the absolute truth? Is this what happened? More important question. Is history a simple coming up with a list of what happened? Is that history? That isn't. History is not a simple chronological listing of everything that happened. History is understanding why it happened. What is the impact of it happening? And Zinn had a version, and Schweikart and Allen had a version. Historians try and say, and here's the importance of that. It's not just a listing, that's a timeline. History is not a timeline. History is where the historian is trying to get you to say, and this means he's bad, or hooray, that was great. And then try and prove it. Your job, you are historians. You are historians who are evaluating the versions of two other historians. By the way, they did it with each other. Schweikart and Allen read Zinn's book. They read it, and they said, what a pile. It's a bunch of lies. It's anti-American propaganda from that commie. It's true, they thought he was a communist. Okay. Zinn read those books and said, what a bunch of crap. It's propaganda. It's America, the country that can do no wrong. And we're doing you a disservice by making you think that. Because if you believe America can do no wrong, then America is not guilty of anything, ever. And that's a disservice.
Did Schweikart and Allen believe that Zinn was a communist during the Red Scare?
The timing is not quite right, but so no. Okay, back to this. And now look at your roadmap. Your roadmap should be something like this. Okay, in your roadmap, there should be at least 4 sentences. There should be a sentence of Zinn's view of your issue number 1, and Schweikart and Allen's view of your issue number 1, and Zinn's view of your issue number 2, and Schweikart and Allen's view of your issue number 2. Now, okay, so here are my 2 sentences of Zinn issue number 1, Zinn issue number 2, and Schweikart and Allen issue number 1, issue number 2. Is yours like this? Or is it like this? Or is it like this? Or is it like this? All 4 are acceptable. It's just fine. Do you present the 2 arguments from the historian you disagree with, followed by the one you agree with, which is what I suggested, but I also said you don't have to? Or do you do it where you address historian number 1's view of Columbus, and then Schweikart and Allen's view of Columbus, and then Zinn's view of European colonization, and Schweikart and Allen? Do you do it that way? Fine. Agree, disagree, agree, disagree. Or disagree, agree, disagree, agree. Or agree, agree, disagree, disagree. Fine. But whatever you do in that paragraph is what you're doing in the rest of the essay. If it's like this in the paragraph, it's like this in the essay. I may have said this yesterday, and I shouldn't have, but your thesis doesn't have to be that. I said your roadmap has to match, but this is a weird thesis. On the one hand, however, and on the other hand, however, that's weird. So your thesis should be like this, or like this. Let me give you an example. I'll just pretend I'm going to agree with Schweikart and Allen. While it appears that Zinn's interpretation of Columbus as an awful person and his interpretation of European colonization as a selfish act seems accurate, comma, in truth, Schweikart and Allen's interpretation of Columbus as a hero and the European colonization as a selfless act is a more valid rendering of history, period. See what I did there? I have both historians, I have all 4 topics, and I have judgment. That's your thesis. Look at your thesis. Is your thesis 1 sentence? It better be. It needs to be 1 sentence with both historians and both historians' view of both topics. 2 times 2, 4, right? Zinn's view of issue number 1, Zinn's view of issue number 2, Schweikart and Allen's view of issue number 1, Schweikart and Allen's view of issue number 2, all in 1 sentence with judgment. Do you do that? If not, fix it. Fix it. Okay? When you think, when you're reading back over your own and you make your fixes, right? You're scribbling and you're adjusting it. When you think you're ready, trade. Give it to someone else. Sometimes this is normal brain activity. What you do is as you're writing it, your brain fills in what you meant to say. So when then you're reading it, your brain automatically fixes it. And then when you give it to someone else, they're reading it like, this makes no sense at all. Right? And so they'll point to you like, what do you mean by this? And then you'll look at it for the first time and you'll think, yeah, what was that? I mean, haven't we all had that experience where you typed it and you printed it and then the teacher has all these markings and you're like, I didn't even see those things. Yeah, that's normal. Your brain fills it in because the words on the page are your brain's words. And so you're automatically giving yourself the benefit of the doubt. When you get someone else's paper today in class, we're doing this now. When you get someone else's, you're doing them no favors if you give it back to them saying, great. Well, bully for you. Thanks for nothing. You didn't help me. The more you mark these suckers up, the better. The more you're helping your neighbor. Mark these things up, man. The more you find, the better your grade will be. The more I find, the worse your grade will be. The more you find, the less there will be that I find, because you found it already. It'll be addressed. Okay? So that's our goal. Read it over, fix it, give it to a neighbor. Neighbor, look at it with a fine-tooth comb. How's their hook? Are there roadmaps? Sentences. Are there at least 4? How's their thesis? Does it have both historians? Does it have all 4 issues from the historian's point of view? Does it have judgment? Does it make sense? Do you read the thesis and think, yeah, I get it? Or do you read it and say, I have a headache? Okay, and then give it back. Okay, I'll check with you when the big hand is on like the 10. So you got about 8 minutes. You know? Rock and roll. Ben Schmidt came up to me yesterday and said, thanks a lot. So I know many of you reached out to him. So.
Yeah, I did that. You know,
Are we gonna rip this out and turn it into?
I'm not. At some point, it literally happens. One of you raises a hand and says, can you look at this for me? And my response to you is, did you show it to somebody else first? If the answer to that is no, then my answer is no.
you need the right finger.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm generally forgiving of penmanship. I had a student a couple of years ago, Anna Pasno. Do you remember her?
Oh, yeah.
Her writing was so small that I'd like call her over and say, I can't read this. I'm sure it's delightful, but I can't read it. It's too small. So other than that,
I can't understand.
as long as I can read it, I don't really care about penmanship.
Oh, just gonna try to
You have to write. You have to make it a breakdown. Yeah, I know, but like a month of line, I think it's pretty darn good. Technical people like it out. Right. Because it just uses sociology. Pretty good.
Instagram only is there, right?
No, I remember like you give your first stuff, you get
You disagree with
I used to take all my
take their view.
Oh, do you need your note?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you already,
So we
already explained that it's not the same as that.
I guess you want to go left and side. Like, don't actually mention them.
And they are, I grade these
We gotta say.
way
And then,
more intensive.
yeah, you just have to.
I know, I just kind of like followed the format. I looked at my like under God paper. It's like, hey, I can-
So you're saying the roadmap should be at least what if we put Schweiker
You could.
I don't think the order of the roadmap.
So Jed here said, could you create a compound sentence where you identify Schweiger and Allen's view of both issues in one sentence? Yes, you could. You could. So it wouldn't be 4 sentences, it would be 2.
Yeah, it was nice, like that.
No, I always stare like I just stare at them.
Yeah, like.
I wasn't out.
I figured that out. I thought she's the best scary opponent I ever
No.
You win.
We're not talking about that.
In 5 minutes, what we're gonna do is start attacking paragraph number.
Do you feel like, do I need to have it more organized, or do you think like?
It makes more sense.
Yeah, I didn't know where I thought we were supposed to mention that word.
Oh, I was.
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
If you're practicing with this, it needs to be heavily taped.
It's like.
Beth. I was gonna talk to Beth today. I'll go over to the doctor this weekend.
I did it this morning, actually.
I feel
Hey, can you read
stupid
my hook?
every time I.
I'll show you now. So I'm gonna say one for Schweiker and Allen's.
You know, like, Columbus never actually saw it.
It's a violence.
Yes.
No, not.
But I changed my I did. I'm doing shorter. I was put events in.
No, it's fine. I like when I can take it. What about that?
So what are you doing? You want to read my fucking?
No, that's not.
I don't like choosing.
I think your choice is you would say one interpretation. Because to say possibly is.
Just one religion.
I
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
like, where in the world are we? Like, we just are arguing about Spanish Conquer, like today?
Yeah, one day if we're
But here's the problem with your
No,
roadmap.
one day.
You have a you have a roadmap sentence about European justification for colonization, but you have no roadmap. sentence. What is it? You have a hook about Columbus. Oh, I see. So your hook's about Columbus, but your roadmap's about the other two.
Spanish explorers were looking to expand.
It's like.
Yeah,
Spain was looking to expand.
I don't know.
They're always running.
I like the blood north.
People do.
I mean, it needs.
Tight excuse.
It's in the long.
I just like this sentence is good. I just think even adding like another sentence before it.
With what, like, give me an idea.
I just.
I am about to start talking in like 2 minutes. Oh my God, it's a teacher convention. Oh, another one. Come on, everybody.
Wow, 4 teachers in one. Budget.
$1,400 is all I total. Do you want to be the one that takes over then? I don't know what to do with that number. Like, oh, that's nice.
Are you grading them?
So did you?
Yeah.
You do your comments for what? 200? Yeah, that's what you said. Your CIS one, or not CIS? Well, you don't do it.
No, I don't do it.
So you don't go there anyway. Oh, okay.
It's $1,400.
I did.
Whatever you
I did
did
a conference for 200.
Approved.
Well,
Do I have that
you,
authority?
you approved it in June.
Oh, there you go. We'll take another
So
two.
now we have 1,200.
Okay. I should probably, you know what I should do is probably just make a spreadsheet.
Yeah, because there's like an application that I think I would like to buy the premium version because I've already used it all week.
Approved.
Do I have the authority on?
Did that make sense?
Yeah. It did. I'm like trying to figure out.
Because otherwise it's like, I love these cars. What in the world is going on the screen? Cutting hands Like what was happening in Spain that they wanted to
All right.
Power did they want to
Let's, I mean, you're jamming here, so I hate to interrupt. So, let me talk for a little while, and then I'll give you the rest of the hour to kind of finish here. But I think we should visit paragraph number 2. So we're all looking at right now at that overall blue book essay format thingy, and we're looking at number 2. Or I'll rephrase that. We're looking at whatever you. Okay, let me say this. We're looking at number 2, but for you it might be paragraph number 2, but for you it actually might be paragraph number 4. It depends on how you're writing it, but I'm going to talk about this thing right here, which for you might be moved to over here. But I'm still talking about number 2. Okay? Number 2 is talking about the historian you disagree with, issue number 1. So who is that for you? Do you have the person's name right there? And do you have the issue right there?
Yes.
And then this is something that I think I said yesterday. Do you also have 2 historical examples attached to number 2? Because you should. 2 historical examples. Did you do that? If not, fix it. 1 historical example that proves that the historian you disagree with, at least there's a reason that he views it that way. Because see, look, this appears to be evidence that supports that point of view. And then you have the piece of evidence that says, aha, but look at this. Your rejection evidence. Yes, Caitlin Cap.
So, for the historical evidence, you say like, well, you don't want to quote the documents again. But you said we could use them as historical evidence. So
That's
we're gonna like look up the event and like get information about it.
You could do it that way. Yep. So, but there might be sufficient information in the document for you to just go with it.
Okay.
So she's just asking, we can use document evidence as historical evidence as long as you're not, or you have another document that you're going to use as the document evidence, which means you're not using the previous document as document evidence. So now you can use it as historical evidence, but you don't cite it because you just learned that. It's knowledge you gained from class, and do not cite it. If you cite it, it's now document evidence. Don't cite it. It's historical evidence. Okay? Any other questions before I keep rolling here? All right. So that means you are ready. If everyone has 2 pieces of evidence, one in support of the claim by the historian you disagree with, and one that you're going to use to prove that he's wrong. Okay? That means you can write paragraph number 2. So let's just look at 1 through 6 here. Look at all the things you need to do when you walk in the door Monday. Sorry, people. Grow a pair. This is big boy time. When you walk in the door Monday, you have a good faith attempt at paragraph number 2 with a claim, which is a topic sentence. Let's say you disagree with Zinn. Zinn mistakenly believes that Columbus was a monster, or whatever. Zinn mistakenly believes that the primary motivation for European colonization was to acquire gold. Zinn mistakenly believes that the natives were a superior culture. There, I just gave you, if you have Zinn as your historian you disagree with, I just gave you 3 options. Schweiker and Allen, the other way around. Okay, there's your topic sentence. And then you provide document evidence. Prove that Zinn believes that. Prove it. And how do you do that? With document evidence. Don't quote. You all looked at me in the eye and said you would not quote. Are you a liar? Yes, dear.
When you told us to write just an essay, so like if you want to say essay mistakenly believes, but there's 2 guys, so do you think?
I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
Either way,
I was
you can create this new fictional Frankenstein monster,
essay.
Schweikert and Allen.
Wow.
Half man, half bear, half pig. Man bear.
Half of everything. Let's do it.
Half man bear, half pig. Wait, what if he's half man, half bear pig? Yes, dear.
What if I refer to them as Schwallen?
Just please the first time write Schweikert and Allen, and then in parentheses, what you're going to refer to them from now on.
Schwallen.
Schwallen, fine, I don't care. Okay, that is document evidence. If you want a fine example of what I mean by document evidence, look at the paragraph I gave you about Pepper and Amante. In that paragraph, I paraphrase what that food critic said, but I never quote. You don't quote. What a colossal waste of time. Then, prove it. Prove that there seems to be a set. This is a valid claim. This is the first piece of historical evidence. And, filter in that part words like appears to be, seems to be, it might look like. See, now what you're doing is analysis. You're throwing your judgment in there. You might be fooled into thinking. Oh, by the way, never use the word you. Do not say you. Y-O-U. No. We. Never say we. Very good. I'm very glad you said that.
Pronouns.
Don't say we killed the Indians. I wasn't there. Were you?
Attention, would the following students please report to the lobby?
Violet Covette, Ziana Revard, Allie Webster, and Emily Fitch.
That was Lindy. He shall be punished. Okay. Anyway, we were not there. Never say we. When you get to the World War II essay, don't say we bombed Pearl Harbor or we bombed Japan. I didn't. Did you? The U.S. Navy bombed Pearl Harbor. The U.S. bombed Pearl. The U.S. Navy didn't bomb Pearl Harbor. Japan. Japan. Okay, we didn't do it. All right, very good. Keep going. So analysis is your own perspective. What does this mean? Why is it important? What does this show? What do you think? And then you refute it. This version is wrong. Zinn is mistaken. And by the way, he is mistaken. Not he was mistaken. He is, because historians live forever. But Columbus is dead. Columbus cut off their hands, but Zinn writes that Columbus cut off their hands. Okay? Historians live forever. It says here, do not refer to another document. And don't refer to the other historian. I should meet one historian in each paragraph. One historian. It's either Zinn or Schweikert. And then, one time somewhere, you have to use synthesis. It's going to be here. We can always add that later. In fact, let's do that. Let's worry about the synthesis part later. Okay? You are now charged. I am now giving you the responsibility of cleaning up paragraph 1, and a good faith attempt at paragraph number 2. When you walk in the door. Go for it.
I thought you said you should be on 6.
Oh, no,
You
just
said-
paragraph number 2.
I know,
Is that why you were throwing your head back?
yeah.
I'm not that much of a monster.
He said grow up, so I was like, well, that's pretty wrong.
So the first and second paragraph.
Yes,
Monday.
by Monday,
What time we out of this class? 10?
10 minutes. Okay. Godspeed.
And 3 and 4 key are due next Friday.
Yes, and your first 2 keys are due like 50 minutes ago.
That's 11.
Tonight?
Yeah, that's what you said.
I did not.
Well, I haven't
We
done
can all
it.
go.
Your keys are due at the second the class begins on the day it's due. They're due 50 minutes ago. They're not done yet. They are now late. Now, apparently, I may have misspoke. So I guess I'll forgive you this time. And I will not check to see if you have done it yet till midnight tonight. I'll set the alarm. The 2 keys but from now on, they're due on the day. The second the class begins, they're due. I have the right to say, hold up, everybody, and go to the computer and record your scores. And if you're not done, you now lose half the credit.
Wow.
But I won't do that this time. Forgive it.
So next Friday, have them done by.
Have them done by beginning of class.
I think you should do 11. Yeah, we do it. Because it's.